Today on Primer Talk, I'm honored to be joined by the remarkable coach Urmi Kothari, an energy and movement expert who sits at the powerful intersection of physical fitness, emotional resilience, and experiential transformation. Urmi Kothari is a truly multidimensional individual. At her core, a coach, creator, and lifelong learner. Over the years, she has guided more than 9,000 people toward becoming more integrated in their minds and more alive in their bodies. Her path has been anything but linear. From earning an MBA to becoming a dancer, from fitness coaching to entrepreneurship, and from there into energy work and authorship, each chapter has shaped the next, weaving together science, movement, and self discovery. In 2012, she founded Kinetic Living, a unique approach to training that fuses physical fitness with awareness and energy balance. The philosophy went on to win multiple awards and redefine what holistic movement can mean. A former Nike coach, Urmi holds certifications across disciplines like strength and conditioning, yoga, and functional training, and has become known for bridging the physical and the emotional in everything she teaches. In 2020, at the height of her career in celebrity fitness, Urmi took a bold step, moving closer to nature to deepen her spiritual and personal practice. Out of that transition emerged Shala, a nature-based retreat space focused on stillness, connection, and inner expansion. Since then, she has hosted over multiple immersive retreats across destinations like Bali, the Andamans, Kashmir, Kerala, and bespoke programs for the Entrepreneurs Organization. Today, Urmi continues to explore and teach the art of living kinetically through breath, movement, awareness, and the courage to keep evolving. She's living proof that growth isn't about adding more, but about peeling back layers to find out who we really are. So please, tune into our conversation and get ready to take notes as we explore that journey with Coach Urmi Kothari. A very warm welcome to the show. I'm so delighted to have you here, and this particular podcast is very special to me. Number one, I want to start by expressing my gratitude towards you for helping me unlock the first few levels of my personal transformation. The one-on-one energy coaching sessions that we had, they helped me surface and release a lot of things that were cemented in my subconscious, right? And they really helped me get to this level where I was ready to actually start or bring my podcast back from the dead. So
amazing.
That's all, I owe that to you big time. Thank you so much for that.
We are a team. I keep saying that. So thank you for having me. And if it weren't for your efforts as well, then I don't think this transformation would have happened. So I always say, we are a team. Yeah, we work together.
Thank you for that. All right. I'd love to start with some foundational aspects of the broader initiatives that you have. The world, as I understand it, is energy in rest, energy at rest, or energy in motion, right? Movement and stillness. And that has a lot to do with some of your programs, initiatives that in movement with the fitness, constant movement, and then come back and relax with all the stillness, right? So if we zoom out and look at the relationship between stillness and movement and how that has evolved over time, like when we were hunter-gatherers, what did movement mean back then? How it has evolved, and now in today's day and age where everything is so fast in this hustle-based culture, what role do both these components play for human beings at large or their wellness at large?
Okay. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here because it's been a while since I recorded a podcast, and you asking these questions gives me a platform to express my viewpoints to these very universal subjects. So thank you for that. And coming to your questions, right? First of all, it's not world at rest and world in motion because if you look at the first or one of the laws of the universe, which is law of vibration, which means everything vibrates, right? And that means even something that appears to be still is still emitting a certain frequency, right? We could be in stillness and we are probably emitting a frequency of peace, of harmony. And when we are ill or when we are hustling, our cells are also vibrating at a certain frequency, and so is that with all other beings as well. And so coming back to where it started, right? If you look at hunters gatherers, their life was not isolated from the cycles of nature. Their life was not isolated from the cycles of the ecosystem, which is in the animals, in the seasons. So there's always movement, right? We are transitioning from one season to the other. Night is becoming day, day is becoming night. And that's why we have rhythms, right? That's the second law as well, which is law of rhythm, which is that anything that goes one way goes the other way as well. So coming back to, you can look at movement and stillness as on a spectrum, where in the past these people were hunting for food, they were traveling from one place to the other, so there was always movement. But on a daily basis, for survival, for food, they also needed to move in that ways. And coming back to the stillness part, when they were being so present, because there was no technology back then, there were very few things that were taking them away from the present. Naturally there were moments of stillness, right? Gathering with a community where we are fully present and connecting with each other, sitting around a fire, being with their loved ones, tending to their families, being praying was such a big part of so many different cultures. And what was praying is to connect with, that time the sun was the god, the moon was the god, the elements were the god, because man was at the mercy of the elements. If there was a major storm, if there was anything which was life threatening, that would directly impact their families. And then of course they became in bigger numbers, then they started gathering cattle, sheep, all of that as well. So if you see, every time man was always in connection with nature. And now if you come to gradually over the period of so many decades and centuries, we are here in a hustle based culture where there is so much movement, right? Where in a way, if you look at a human body, that hasn't changed. The nervous system hasn't evolved much the way the civilization has evolved. And if you see, this nervous system is still operating from the olden days. So only difference is what man thought was an actual threat to his life back then, which could be actually a predator, or which could be, let's say, a storm or a famine, right? Man's nervous system is still sensitive to those threats. But now what has happened is, in this hustle culture, slowing down has become a threat.
Right.
Maybe, let's say, and when I say slowing down, I'm not just talking about taking a holiday, right? Is that, can I plan only 4 things in the day rather than 8 things in the day? And that is also me living my life, showing up for my tasks, but just having a certain deliberate pace to it. Now, this is where I can also say it, and I don't know how many people will agree with me, but from my experience as well, and from what my experience with my clients as well, is that movement and stillness are sides of a spectrum, and movement and awareness, right? Movement and awareness are like inversely proportional to each other. The faster your day, right, the less likely you are to be aware of your own self.
Right.
And if you have a slightly deliberate pace of the day, like planning 4 things instead of 8 things, you're able to be fully present in those 4 things, right? And the moment you're being more present, you can still do something from a quality of stillness.
Correct.
Right? So even like, for example, even just before this podcast, right? Like you were feeling a little nervous. This is your first episode in such a long time, new format, right? And then if you just took a breath and say, and let's say you had planned something extra after this, it would have been rushing you internally. But if you don't have something planned, it's like, it's okay. Even if I make a mistake, I can retake this, for example. So automatically, you have signaled your nervous system that it's not a threat to make a mistake.
Right.
Right? It's not a threat to do this slightly slowly, because there's no one waiting for you after this. Right? So if you see, in the modern times, what has become a threat is missing out on the bus. You know, FOMO is acting as such a big it's acting as an anti-stillness pill right now. where people are feeling FOMO, people are feeling like they need to be somewhere, they need to catch up on things, and that's preventing them from approaching anything with awareness.
Right.
So this is where I would say that movement and stillness are equally important, but you can experience both at the same time as well, however paradoxical it may sound. But it's like, imagine you are in a flow state, maybe doing a painting or in your runs or going for your biking rides, and you're feeling like you've forgotten time. So in a way, you are doing something, you are engaged with something, but it's coming from a place of calmness, stillness, presence.
No, thank you for laying such a strong foundation. So you would say the problem statement is that we are operating on a outdated operating system, right?
And actually, no, I would not look at it that way. I would say we are where we are in our space and evolution, in our point in evolution. And I don't think man has control over it in that sense. He can only control how he works with what he's been given. And if man has been given this nervous system right now, he's also been given the tools
Yeah.
to operate it in a way where he has more control.
Yes.
But again, coming to is the same thing, is that he thinks he doesn't have the control, or he thinks he doesn't have the time to learn how to control the way he or she is showing up. So coming back to, like, it's not about we are operating on an outdated nervous like a programming system, but this is what yogis probably knew, the people who founded breath work, the people who knew so many things, like who built the pyramids, like they knew some things that we clearly don't, right? So it's like we've forgotten those things. And maybe it's time for us to just pause a little bit, slow down a little bit, and like use this balance of outer success and inner awareness as well.
So I'm curious to know, so since we've laid down the foundation, right? So how do the broad initiatives that you have with Kinetic Living and with Shala as well, right? There are a lot of gray areas that probably, we could understand much, much better from you. So how do those, how do these initiatives embody the principles or the foundational aspects of movement and stillness?
That's a great question. So if you look at it, I just said about we have the tools of how we can maximize the nervous system, our bodies, and let's not forget that the body is not man-made, right? And the body has so many intelligent systems within it which are so interconnected, right? Imagine you look at the sun, and the certain quality of the sun's rays fall into our pupils, and that does something to our brain which helps us to reset our circadian rhythm, right? So you can see how much interconnected we are to everything around us. We can't live without water, we can't live without oxygen. And the idea is that the point that I'm trying to make here is that the body has so much more intelligence beyond what we give it meaning to, and currently, because of lack of time or lack of, I would say, stillness, or the safety of I can be still, and that's also related to the economy, the way the countries function, the way people need to survive. And there are, like, we are the privileged ones talking here about personal growth and inner stillness, but there are so many people who are still like surviving as well. So coming back to, the body has so much more than it just being fed and being as a aesthetic tool or as a means to go about our goals. In fact, today's movement is not just movement. Now, fitness, there are so many, that's how my journey started in fitness, and that's what Kinetic Living is, since coming back to your question, which is Kinetic Living is where it's a training method, it's a living method where you're able to combine the physical quotient, which is strength, endurance, balance, body awareness, with even self-awareness. So how does the food respond to me? How does my workout respond to, like, how's my body responding to the workout? What is my relationship with my body? Why do I want to lose weight? And it's not about you should not try to lose weight. It's about why, right? And then also happiness, right? Where is my, like, is it right to be fit or is it right to be happy, and where do they come together, right? So kinetic living is within these three pillars, and Shala is my aim at delivering the kinetic living method, but in settings of nature, because this is where in the last 5 years my evolution with connection with nature, understanding the healing power of nature, has, I want to bring that to people. So you can think of as Shala as having its own values of wild-spirited living, wisdom, and wealth, right? And that brings me to what we spoke earlier, is that if man just knew, or the women or men just knew that they had the tools to do it themselves and not depend on something external to feel good, to feel fit, to feel focused, that is the wisdom. And these are the tools that I'm teaching in Shala, but through, concentrated periods of 4-5 days, through concentrated weekends where we come together. And Shala is more community driven, where it's in person, it's more about healing emotionally as well. Whereas kinetic living is more like being yours independent and having that independence within you. And over the years, I've made kinetic living online. So that means in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, I get it.
Again, if you are pressed for time, which comes back to, the hustle culture, is that, okay, you live in a hustle culture, maybe that's your demand right now. You can use the kinetic living principles and make do with time. And then ultimately, let's say once a year, twice a year, you come to a Shala gathering and you are able to now accelerate that growth even further, even deeper, with people who are living a same kinetic life in their silos as well. So it's like, and I really feel that in today's day and age and coming forward, we are going to grow not just as a group and not just as an individual. We need both. Like, you do your work and so other people do their work, but then they all come together as well.
So if we were to take a glimpse into what happens in there, right? So what are some tools and techniques, just, you could cover briefly, that you teach people that helps them reset or, immerse more in, with nature and all those things? Even with kinetic living, what are the tools and techniques that you focus on? Or maybe it is customized according to, the person. But what are some tools and techniques both the areas, kinetic living and Shala, have, so that we can get an idea of how you address betterment of or overall well-being, right, with these two initiatives that you have?
So with kinetic living, it started in 2012, where I created this method, and of course there's a book on it as well. The first pillar, like I said, is the physical quotient, and that the pillar is of movement and breath. And breathing in kinetic living is more around how to learn how to engage your core muscles, not holding your breath during workouts. And the fitness aspect is covered by integrating 4 to 5 different disciplines. It's body weight strength training, it's yoga, Pilates warm-up exercises, and then of course we have dumbbells and kettlebells. And then if the person is evolving further, then I introduce doing more animal flow and doing more complex exercises. But this is the foundation where you're able to build strength, endurance, but also balance and body weight awareness, your posture. So, and like it's every single student of mine, I'm not joking, who I've taught in fitness as well, has come back to me and say, Urmi, your voice is still in my head. Like, I'm always told that my form is great. So I really believe that what I set out to do, and now they could be training with anyone, honestly, it doesn't matter. So like I said, kinetic living is about empowering the student. So I can say this very in a solid fashion that all my students who've trained with me, they are doing so well, whether they are with other people or they are training by themselves.
Right.
And then coming to the awareness, like I said, connection with food, what is your emotional relationship with food, that comes under kinetic living. So we go through like reflection questions. So journaling is another tool apart from your workouts, how to learn how to do breathing, like I said. And then you have the happiness quotient, which honestly is more about what life is throwing at you as well, and how to tailor your fitness programs, your fitness goals as per your life phases. And that will ultimately make you realize that fitness is going to make you a happier person, because it's aligning with who you are and how it helps you become. Let's say for you, it could be you want to go for like a bicycle trail, right? If kinetic living strength programs, fitness breathing programs are helping you do that, mental awareness of why you want to go for a cycling trail, then you're going to be a really happy person. Same way for a photographer. If their back is hurting at the end of the day, they're going to eventually start feeling like their work is depleting their health. So how do they become the kinetic person at work? Right? So kinetic living is more about curating your kinetic life through fitness, through breathing, through awareness. So like there's a term called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to shift its structure. So that only changes with repetition. Right? So consistency. And ultimately at the top is balance, right? You understand that my fitness is not just in my workouts, it's also in the way I'm eating, but also the emotion with which I'm eating, how I'm sleeping. So there's a very good chapter in my book which is called 21 Bs, which covers all of these tools in very simplistic manner. And like I mentioned about the circadian rhythm, like understanding how your body's rhythm is there and working with the body rather than against it. Right? And in Shala, you could think of all of this, but applied in real time, happening in the retreat. But also we focus on deep breath work. So we do more functional breathing. We understand conscious connected breath work, which is used more for emotional healing as well, for spiritual exploration as well. So Shala is more esoteric, I would say. And Shala has a little bit more of the spiritual element. And that's come from my personal journey as well. My journey with my creative pursuits, what my purpose is, all of that. So Shala is more of, you can think of it as energy coaching, life coaching from a spiritual and I can say a little bit of like a quantum science kind of perspective.
Right. So back in 2012, you started your journey as a coach with Kinetic Living, which sought to transform the way people perceive and achieve physical fitness. That's something that you also beautifully explained right now. Over the years, your work has expanded into emotional well-being, energy, what we discussed with Shala. So I'm a little curious about what are the key learnings or turning points or even setbacks for that matter that basically, led to this evolution, maybe led you to rethink everything, maybe drop your assumptions or unlearn a lot of things, right? So maybe we can get into that as well, of how you so swiftly
Oh no, it was not swift at all.
Whatever your journey was, however it was, what were the key turning points or
Got it.
setbacks for that matter, or hurdles that led to this?
Again, a great question. So just to in fact, I'll start with that. One of the things that really made me successful in my first half of my fitness career was this, like, of course I still have it, but that fire has transformed. Earlier when I started and as a student in school, I was always this hardcore disciplined person who's gonna have like a strict timetable and always trying to beat my previous performance. So I think that kind of a need to up my game from the previous, literally like from the previous month it could be, or from the previous year, you always want to do better. And of course, that time, everything I believe that in your life serves you up until now. So I would never think of it as it should have never happened, or I didn't know what I was doing. No, I think I was doing to the best of my capacity in my awareness. So in the first 8 years of Kinetic Living, I was saying yes to every client, saying yes to every project, saying yes to every single idea I had. So there was, of course, there was some amount of impatience there. But I know that that impatience was driven through excitement, enthusiasm, and ultimately because, like I said, our bodies are not man-made.
Yeah.
So there came a point in 2019 where I realized that even though I was really wanting to do so many ideas and execute it, I didn't have the physical energy to get up and go to work and feel like I have my full energy with me. And that again was because of I didn't was not recovering properly. I was trying to do 3 to 4 jobs at the same time, managing a studio, training, coaching, right? So there were so many things happening. I was wearing too many hats. So burnout was my first lesson that happened. And that again happened because I realized I went for a personal growth summit there, and I knew some things were brewing, but I didn't know they were like grossly imbalanced. And that's when I did my first ever conscious connected breathwork session. And it really just opened up my awareness just to tell me, then that was my intuition telling me, Urmi, something is not right inside. And when I say right, I mean balanced. That you need to work with someone, you need to get support so that you can navigate through this. And I think that was a big turning point for me. So I would say I started to understand my relationship with productivity. I started to understand my relationship with my identity as Coach Urmi. So I would say the first, like I said, setback or lesson was the burnout, where I realized that I paused and I said, why am I going at this pace? What is driving me? And then that completely unraveled into understanding my inner child. And then that went into understanding, I went into shadow work. So over the last 5 years, I've gone and understood the parts of me that were so scared to slow down or so scared to face my other sides, which were not just coach, So I think that was the first. Second one was the lesson I learned how to build boundaries with my own insecurities, with my own doubts. Am I doing enough, right? Am I comparing myself to others? And then post-lockdown, when I moved out of Bombay, I closed down the studio in Bombay, and then I moved to Goa. I had to also come face to face with that who am I if I'm not the celebrity coach, and who am I without my Bombay clients and without my celebrity clients. So again, that comes into shadow work as well. So the third lesson was building boundaries with those doubts, negative chatter, but also constantly anchoring in radical self-acceptance and trusting. This is the fourth lesson, which is trusting where my intuition and where my heart was feeling like it's happy doing what it's doing. So it's not like I stopped coaching. I was still coaching. I did so many programs all online. And I think looking back now, even though I may see many times, but I've understood now that having just a fixed place of my own in one place is not probably where my calling is. And wherever I see others who have a fixed place, who have a station, brick and mortar space, and whatever I feel when I see that, I know it's coming just from my place of inadequacy, rather than being like, oh no, I want to do this because I want to do it. And I've realized for me, the biggest learning is to trust where I feel happy, where my heart feels happy to serve as well. And that's been having this balance of nature, alone time, solitude, and then having this balance of community, giving back, meeting people, listening to their stories, empowering them, sharing what I've learned. And so this is the fifth, I don't know, I've lost track, but that's another lesson of having that deep work and deep rest kind of a lesson as well. And I think this is what I can say, that if my heart is not feeling happy, if I'm not giving from a full cup, then ultimately I will, burn out again.
Yeah.
So coming back, importance of emotional well-being, importance of validating your own self, and knowing your values. This is another lesson, is that when you pause, right, you say like, what are the tools that we give in Shala as well? One of the things is, let's look at what really appeals to you, what makes you happy, but also bring that into grounded action. How do you integrate those learnings into really going? For example, my biggest lesson, like I said, was value deep work and deep rest. So that means my life day, not just my day structure, but I have enough energy, stamina to do that over a week. So I could have like 4 intense days, but after the 4th day I will have a complete like decompressed day,
Right.
and then I'll move on into more intense work. And the beauty of this is, you could do this in a micro cycle of a day, and I could do this in a macro cycle of a year also, where 4 months of the year I'm like doing workshops, I'm doing like online programs, and then like last year December I just like completely slowed down, and even in my slowdown I was teaching little bit, by the way, but still it was way slower than the rest of the year. And another thing I would like to say, which is that same balance of movement and stillness comes from this as well. Right? You could be engaged in very cognitive heavy stuff, and then you could just be completely daydreaming, because your brain needs both.
Yeah.
So I think these are some of the lessons that have really shaped what I'm teaching, where my coaching is coming from. And the biggest motivator for teaching this is, I've realized that I do a little bit of the talking, and when I teach these tools of breath work, energy exercises, grounding, running your own energy, balance, being able to, let's say, balance your own self, these are all different tools, right? How do you come into the observer mode, accessing your higher self journey? So these are guided meditations, then tapping that we've been doing. Different types of functional breathing exercises, going for ice bath, doing a strength training session 3 times a week, 4 times a week, bringing that discipline in the physical body, taking your supplements. All of this comes into, ultimately, you are a human being, and then you are also bringing in your purpose, your work, and continuing to like know that ultimately you are connected to something larger.
If I recall correctly, I think you took a 10-day expedition to the Arctic, right? Where they so I'm assuming that's part of the take a break and have solitude to yourself, right? Because what would you do in it, in a ship for 10 days?
So actually, for that was I didn't go with the intention of solitude, but for there I know one of my biggest core values, adventure.
Right. So what I wanted to basically lead with that is, like, what change it brought in you? What did you learn from that? And what happens to the mind or the brain for 10 days in complete ice? You only see, just ice and water.
Yeah, I was with 11 other people though. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And with 11 other people.
Yeah.
So that disconnect from actual life, right? Or that is also life, but the kind of life that we are used to be living in.
Yeah.
So what does that disconnect do to you, especially in freezing temperatures and, traveling for 10 days in a ship with 11 people? Like, there are 7 billion people, but you're only there with 11 people.
So, again, like I said, first, you need to have an inclination to do something, which is like I traveled to Norway. From there I took another 4-hour flight, went into this another country which is called Svalbard.
Yeah, Svalbard.
Right? And from there we took a cruise, and you are spending close to 1.5 hours twice a day in that -7 to like -14 temperatures. I went in winter as well. The willingness to be a little bit like, honestly for me, I was never uncomfortable, but when you are out there, you are wearing 4 layers, right? You are you are going to feel cold. Your hands freeze by the end of 1.5 hours when you go out and explore the islands and, see the polar bears. But that's what I mean, is that my connection with nature and the willingness to have that adventure ka keeda and go to remote corners of the world is so much more, that these things just seem like natural. Okay, you just do it, they don't bother you. But for someone who's not as physically fit or who's not willing to be physically uncomfortable, this could feel like, what am I doing, right? And again, comes back to, I know it is worth it for me. So it's not even gonna hit me that I have to do so much to get there. So that's one. And second is how it made me feel. Honestly, I still have so many cherished memories. It's also a great icebreaker for people when I share with them where I've been, right? And everyone wants to know an adventurous story. So for me, I think more than me sharing about it, it's like fulfilled something inside my heart that, I don't think, like very few, like I only think probably nature trips could do that, where you just feel like, wow, I can't believe I went there. So, and when you see it, you realize like you're such a tiny speck. For me, that is like constant reminder that, the practices you teach, the places you go, like you are so small in front of them, so
No, I think the previous question where we talked about your the turning points that led you to sort of
actually I forgot a few other points, which were like, I went through a very heartbreaking breakup.
Yes.
And
were there any heartbreaks?
Yes, it was, and in fact I had two of them over a period of 10 years, and I think both of them just completely, it's like it shifted my trajectory, but I feel like it was meant to be, of course, because I've done the inner work to understand the good stuff that came out of it. And both the times it was took me closer and closer to who I am today. Made me not just mentally stronger, but emotionally resilient. It really helped me embrace those parts of me that were codependent emotionally on people outside of me in my personal life. So I can say that even if I spend a lot of time in solitude as well, and for me it takes a lot for it to go into loneliness now. But I've spent like couple of months like feeling so down, but at the same time not giving up, right? Like I was still coaching, I was still going for my workouts. I would like probably cry for half an hour in the morning and then go and like, no, I'm gonna do this. And that was also the time I moved to Goa. So you really understand yourself where you are not valuing yourself. It teaches you how to appreciate yourself radically. It also brings a lot of trust that if you could go through that, then you can go through a lot. And another thing is that now the kind of people you meet, you can see through BS, You can also protect yourself, not from a space of defensiveness, but in fact, it's opened me up more to people because I have trust in myself that if this person has not so good intentions for me, my intuition will tell me, and I just need to be present with that and be like, okay, what is it trying to tell me? Rather than be like, oh, this is a bad person, oh, this is a good person. No one is good or bad. And I also know that those people who have hurt me, I have hurt some other people unintentionally. So I have asked for forgiveness. I have given forgiveness. It really humanizes you, I would say that. And that has really enriched my coaching with people.
That's a nice segue into the next, question that I had. And that is, there is a lot of buzz around the word integration. So, could you explain? I don't want to adulterate its meaning, so I'll leave that up to you.
But I'm curious, where did you hear the word integration?
As I mentioned in one of our coaching sessions, right, I listen a lot to Andrew Huberman. And he invites a lot of brilliant scientists, doctors, psychologists. Right? Yeah. So there was, they talked about
I love his podcast as well. Yeah.
I'm not able to recall her name, but I think Carol Dweck is a very
Okay.
famous psychologist that he had a talk with. So that's when I came to know, because she also mentioned integration a lot. And a lot of other podcasts as well, it showed up a lot. And now, since I follow such people, I follow you, or I follow, so now my Instagram is full of integration. So because you're a pro at this and you're teaching aspects of integration, right? So I would not want to adulterate its meaning and let you explain what it means. What are the core components that go into integration, right? And how should people approach it?
Okay.
Right?
So I'm sure there are probably different theories, models.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm going to speak from my life experience and from what I've learned from my teachers and what I have taught my clients, what I've taught myself, and what's worked as well.
Yeah.
So integration, I would not say is like a separate subject. It's a stage in personal growth, right? Or any kind of inner growth that happens. Let's look at it like that, right? Step one is there is some kind of awareness. Step one is awareness, right? That, okay, something's amiss.
Yeah.
Or let's say there is something lacking which I would want to improve on. Or the awareness simply could be, hey, everything is amazing and I have a fertile ground to make change happen for the better.
Right.
That's awareness first. Second step comes into what we can call as aligned action. From that space of awareness that, okay, so I'll take one example, right? That, okay, things are great, my life is looking good, I have a steady income. Because remember, for survival, for the nervous system to feel like it's ready for growth, it has to feel stable.
Right.
And that's where also learning, creativity only happen, by the way, when the nervous system feels safe.
Yes.
So I'm just letting you know that psychology is as connected to your nervous system. And that's what I'm teaching as well, is that you can keep talking, but if your nervous system is not regulated, your integration will not happen. So I'm coming to that, right? So let's say awareness is, I'm feeling good, my income is steady, I have a good house, I have a good good environment where I feel relaxed. Now I'm ready to take life to the next level, right? So that's the first. Now let's say that person wants to let's say start a side business,
Right.
okay? So that's the now aligned action. So aligned action means forget starting it first. It's like, okay, what do I want to start on, right? What makes me feel recharged, right? What are the different, where am I good at? You can think of it as maybe doing an ikigai first exercise, right? Where am I good at? What value can I bring? And what can I get paid for? Right? And then finding that intersection. That is also part of aligned action in a way, right? Then you get some awareness about it, and then you plan baby steps towards it, right? Now, while you're planning those baby steps, maybe you will start coming across challenges. Right? Oh, what if I do this? What if I fail? Or what if I do this? Maybe I will not find any customers. Right? And some other challenge could be, oh my God, now suddenly my week has become so hectic that I don't have time for myself. Right? There could be so many challenges coming up there. Or maybe they feel, oh, I don't have time for my partner, or I don't have time for my friends, anything. So now, how does the person deal with these challenges that come up? Do they fall back into their, let's say, oh, this is too hard for me, I'm not going to do this side gig? Or they come face to face with certain limiting beliefs, that is psychology, right? Maybe they come across some inner child related patterns, which is fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of maybe they feel like if I'm not available for my partner for X number of time, and if I take that time away, then my partner will leave me, right? Or what if I lose money? So fear of maybe scarcity, scarcity can come up. Now, how does the person deal with all of these beliefs? They go in, they see what it is, they do some breath work, regulating breath work, they notice these limiting beliefs and rewire them, and then show up for the side gig actions.
Yeah.
That is integration.
Right.
That is integration. So I'll repeat that. When you apply, let's say you got to know XYZ is holding me back. You did the work, you processed your emotions. That's where people like me come in, professionals like me come in. They help you process those emotions. They help you see and reframe those perspectives, right? And maybe the new beliefs could be, it's safe for me to change, right? I value my own abilities and I trust my intuition. For example, like these three things. Now, when they wake up, they actually do the breathing and they remind themselves of this, right? Then when they, let's say they feel lost during the side gig preparation or doing this, they may have visual cues in the house which may remind them of their values. Why are they doing this side gig? Do they want extra finances? Do they want financial freedom?
Yeah.
Do they want to reach out to more community? Whatever it is. So when they remind themselves, it fuels them to do better at their side gig. And that is integration. Like you're really integrating that change, those new beliefs into your action.
Right.
So integration is like an ongoing process, and many people think that, okay, once they're aware, that the job is done. Yes, the change starts there, but it doesn't end there. It only comes full circle when you act on it. And then that action, that experience of doing that action, and maybe genuinely it may not work out after a year, but who you become in the process of that is integration.
Right.
Because now your neural pathways are no longer the same.
Yeah.
Right? You did a gig, okay, it didn't work out, but next time you try it, imagine your readiness to try it. Again, you may be scared, but you'll be like, it's okay. If I failed, but nothing happened,
Right.
people still love me. I still feel good. I'm still here. I still have a steady income. Maybe I made some losses, but I believe that I can make money. My talents make me money.
Right.
So if you see, it's not just psychology integration, but it's also your relationship with money,
Yeah.
right? It's coming in
Right.
down into everyday habits,
That's right.
right? So integration also happens at levels.
But like, for example, if we were to look at things that sometimes we do not know and are, silently from the background actually hurting
Yeah,
us or
operating.
working against us, right?
Yes,
For
yes.
example, I've seen that the inner child sometimes works against us if we do not know and we are
Yeah,
not aware
absolutely.
of that, right?
That's the
Our
unconscious
shadow.
behaviors.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, could you speak a little bit about, the inner child and the shadow and how do they impact and, how your practices sort of try to bring them into light? We don't have to get too much in detail because that's what you would do in your courses.
yeah.
But, just a approach on how you seek to bring them to light
Yeah,
with your clients, and with the people that you work with yourself even. Because
Yeah,
you're a human being
absolutely,
after all.
absolutely. Yeah.
So-
The best part about this work is you can't teach this work or you can't hold space for the other person till you haven't done that for yourself. And there's a very popular saying that you can only meet people as deeply as you have met yourself.
Right.
Right? If I've met the darkest parts of me, and I know I'm going to meet more darker parts of me for sure, but when I meet them, my relationship with them is better now what it was than 5 years ago. So now those dark parts of me or those lesser parts of me or those triggered parts of me no longer hijack me.
Yes, hijack you. That's
Right,
a good word.
right. So coming to your question, right? So inner child is a concept where we understand that all of us have an inner child, have a parent, right, and have an adult self.
Yes.
Now the parent inside of us is usually a mix of how we have been parented, via the culture, our schools, our teachers, of course our primary caregivers, our parents, maybe our grandparents. And if you have been living in India like a joint family, then you will have multiple voices in your head.
Chachi, everyone.
Exactly.
Mommy.
Yeah, right. And the second thing is so there are three people: adult, parent, and inner child. Now, the second thing to remember is that inner child is not about blaming your parents and then saying, I am the way I am because this happened to me. In fact, when we create awareness about, the parent inside me is criticizing or is holding the inner child or is neglecting the inner child, you will then start to make different actions, like changes happen. So I'll hashtag it to the integration part of the conversation. But to make it simpler, so when you understand that you have a parent and you have an inner child who needs unconditional caring, nurturing, holding, touching, and in a way nourishment, then you are able to reparent yourself basis how you would like your life to be from the present to future. And this is where I want to really bust the myth, is that inner child, even though we look in the past, we are not staying in the past. We are seeing what are the clues in the present that are telling me that what needs to be healed from the past so I can catapult into the future. I hope I've used the word catapult right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Catapult
So it's
yourself
like,
in the future.
then it's like a slingshot. We know what's holding us back, and when we release that energy, the emotions that need to be resolved from childhood, then you just go ahead. Because now nothing's holding you back, and that's the adult self. So in a way, this is like the concept. And I give another module as well, which is, in order to know these three people inside of you, first you need to become an observer, right? That what voice inside me is the inner child's voice, what inside me is the parent's voice, what inside me is the adult
Diagnosis,
voice.
yeah.
And usually the adult is like the wiser self, right? The adult is the one who can make rational
Yes.
decisions, keeping all situations and the options in your purview. And in a way, you're free functioning from the prefrontal cortex. And psychologically, the inner child may show up in your life when you are not able to bring your emotional needs into satisfaction by yourself, where you're codependent from in like towards others to feel good, to feel validated, to feel appreciated. You're constantly dependent on other people, right? Feeling like you're not enough, feeling like imposter syndrome, feeling like you're always being left behind, or feeling like you can't speak, you can't express yourself because you feel that, oh, people are too cool and I'm not so cool. Or the other way, which is like trying to take up attention all the time, right? These are just, I'm just quoting very few of them because every case is so individual that I will not pretend to just say this is the usual pattern. And while psychology may purely do that, like I said, I don't depend only on psychology. I use this inner child concept to help the client understand. But then we also really look at it from energy point of view. How it's affecting your energy centers, your chakras basically. And we use energy tools to help the client release emotional blocks. And the shadow that you were saying, so shadow is essentially, it's a concept by Carl Jung. And to give the listener who's never heard about shadow work, it's look at it this way, that if you are feeling like there's suddenly a part of you that comes alive in certain situations where you may regret, you may feel embarrassed, you may feel like you don't want to be that side of you, you're avoiding that side of you, you're avoiding certain emotions. So everything that you avoid, everything you judge, everything you are embarrassed about or shameful about yourself is in your shadow. So for example, simple example I will take is, let's say someone's has a very good routine and they enjoy that routine, they feel good at that they're doing this routine, but let's say because of some reason life happens, right, and they're not able to do the routine consistently. Now instead of first pausing and saying, okay, I'm not able to do the routine, how am I feeling, if they don't do it, they may not feel good about themselves. So if they, for like I said, for no reason they cannot do it, they are scared to face that feeling of maybe feeling guilty or not, or feeling like shameful for not doing their regular habits. So what happens? They may constantly feel, they may like criticize themselves, they may feel in guilt, they may feel like they are only in a loop till they go and do it. but that means they're draining so much of their like energy unconsciously. And that brings me to like the question you asked me, right? Like what happens when all of these patterns are running below the surface and we don't know about it? So A is the two best ways to create awareness is to first answer these reflection questions. Is that what do I avoid? What do I judge myself for? Right? Do I take time to understand how I feel loved? Right? That's the inner child. How do I would like to feel appreciated?
Yeah.
How can I give myself or allow myself to do something without the pressure of a goal at the end of it? You know, like maybe just can be painting for 1 hour with no pressure to make a beautiful painting. Right? So both inner child, shadow have a relationship with each other ultimately. And the ego will come there as well. And that is too complex for me to explain it here. But they all work in tandem with each other. And so first tool is the journaling. And second is when you engage in breathing practices. That's what I told you, right? As a coach, I feel these practices are also so powerful that you combine mental awareness, mental coaching with emotional and energetical coaching, which helps the student connect with their body, help them understand where are the sensations in the body, help them understand where do certain emotions live in the body, and then using breathing practices, using movement practices, these things they will come up on their own, that they will start having realizations.
Body keeps the score.
Body keeps the score. And also like they will start to notice, okay, what am I doing? And that's because the nervous system is the connection point between your mind, your emotions, your body. So the moment you breathe, your nervous system comes into a more balanced state. From that space of balance, your brain is more conscious. His brain is more aware of what's going on. So now you don't need an Urmi to constantly like point out things to you. The breath is doing this, your practices are doing this.
Yeah.
And then of course you add it, the layers will come with a strong mindset.
Right. Thank you for sharing so much that you have already shared with us. But I'm super curious about a lot of things. So there are questions. There are more incoming questions. I'm going to barrage you with them. So when we were talking about integration, right, let's try to look into a real life example from one of your clients, right, of how life looks. I mean, it's totally up to you to share that or maybe anonymize the person.
Of course, I will. It will be anonymous. Yeah.
Of how life looked for them before integration and during the process and then after integration, right? Any success stories? Definitely you've had a lot of success stories, but one thing one story that stood out to you particularly is something that I also want to explore with you.
Got it.
Benefits of integration. Yeah.
So while you were asking this question, I thought there's one story which I feel could be relevant for many people right now, and that's also something that I'm not actively advocating, but I do advocate that to my community, which is to have conscious consumption of alcohol.
Right.
And one of my clients, very successful person, very in a leadership position, very, like I said, well read, well traveled, lived abroad, studied abroad, and is also at a very high position in their business. And when they came to me first, they came for one of my retreats, and then they wanted to work one-on-one, and we started exploring. Even without me saying it, when we started exploring certain inner child related patterns, which were about people pleasing or, taking care of others' needs before they could of their own, and always having the role of keeping it together, being the strong one. It's amazing how these small patterns also play out in that person's alcohol consumption, where they were whenever they would be in a setting with other leaders, they would end up consuming alcohol even if they didn't like the taste. And when we inquired, we inquire it in a very gentle and curious way rather than a judgmental way, we realized that person was having alcohol because they didn't want to be seen in a certain way, or they were like, I don't want to be facing the questions I will be asked, or I don't want to seem as a certain person who's not with the group. And when we work through certain deeper inner child related patterns, in a month, automatically this person has come to me and they are like, you know what, I stopped. And they started choosing another beverage, which for them, like they didn't have what they used to, what they didn't like. And then they chose something that they actually like, even without feeling like they're going to be judged, or it's such a feminine drink or XYZ. And now they're at a point where they're not even consuming alcohol. And all of this is not because I am saying that don't have alcohol, right? Of course it has its own health negative effects and all of that, but ultimately for me, what I helped that person change is their relationship with consuming that alcohol, right? And everything is about that. Personal transformation is that. So now if you see post integration, they don't find the need to have. And the other day we had a session and they came back to me and they said that the previous night they had done like a lot of alcohol, and next day, where their previous self would actually go for junk food and greasy breakfast to just get over with the hangover and come out of it, they in fact observed that urge, but they chose to go for a workout, eat a healthy breakfast, and not binge on like greasy or chocolate and things like that. And they're like, I could see it. And they didn't even feel guilty about having so much alcohol the previous night. And they also knew how to bounce back from it.
So they were able to override the cascading effect. Usually
Absolutely.
people fall prey to, right? So if I take alcohol, if I'm able to restrain from alcohol for a long time, and I do it all of a sudden, then all the cascading behaviors like, okay, eat junk food, wake up late, and just stay in bed.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah,
right?
domino effect, exactly.
And so another thing, which is the big part of, is that integration is not a linear process, which means that one time, depending on the intensity and the magnitude of the change, right? Let's say this person has done it in such a beautiful way, but maybe let's say they were in they had a lot of alcohol when they were in a big setting with maybe on a vacation, then maybe there could have been chances where they could have gone and done those cascading behaviors, because they're not necessarily in a setting where they need to also like have it to show up for work the next day or the day after that. So I'm just saying is that integration is not so linear. It's not just one layer, but the whole point is the person in that journey, the person that, in this case my client, they were aware of what they were doing.
Right.
So the more aware we are, for example, let's say you said if you did it, all the cascading behaviors would start. But what if you just became aware that, okay, I've enjoyed myself, now I still have the opportunity to recover differently. And if you practice that action after that awareness, automatically you integrated a different, more aligned and aware version, healthier version of you already, just by shifting that 10%.
That's
right?
truly
So
powerful.
this is what I mean to say is that in healing, in transformation, it's not linear. Like it's all moves in a circle. Maybe you've dealt with some basic core limiting beliefs, and then as you move forward, maybe those same beliefs will come in different ways, in different situations,
Right.
in different areas of your life.
So, when we talk about, these examples, I think some of the things or patterns that are showing up is definitely, growth during the development stage, how it happens, right? When a child is developing, that matters a lot. Good parenting matters a lot.
Yes.
Because, or, good authority
Environment.
figures.
Yeah.
To guide you and to sort of,
I would
help
say
you.
all constitutes in
Yes.
the space of environment.
Right. Environment, exactly. The right environment is definitely helpful, because sometimes at 27, 28 or even 30, 35, you're having a crisis, and that's when you realize that you need to, look inwards. There is something that needs proper diagnosis, understanding. And so what I want to ask you is, what are some basic things, maybe, or good parenting techniques that can be adopted, or that parents can take away, because these days even parents are really busy with their jobs. I have seen multiple people where they're not paying enough attention to their children. That's not true for the entire population, but at least for the people at large, I've seen this. So what are certain things that probably they can practice when it comes to being mindful with their child or children, so that this doesn't affect their development, and later in life they don't have to sort of go through various crises. So it could be on various spectrums, right? Sometimes the lack of good parenting might not affect the child as much, but if it goes to a extreme side of the spectrum, it can lead to people having depression, at later points of life, and some certain life-taking decisions also being taken, right? I'm actually formulating as I go, because this is something that maybe as parents, as well-learned, educated people, we can adopt and practice with our children. So what would your guidance to be on, not to get too much into the psychological aspects of it, but what are certain techniques or good parenting techniques that people can adopt interacting with their child?
Yes, I'm going to address this because I'm not a psychologist, but at the same time, I understand energy, I understand basics of how it affects and so how your parenting and how your behaviors affect the inner child. So one is that when parents do their own inner child healing, their own in parenting their own inner child, they will start to undo certain limiting or habits or certain parental behaviors that could have been detrimental to the child's growth, because now the parent is also connected to their own inner child. So in a way, automatically whatever parenting patterns that were not serving their growth, they are stopping right there and they are shifting, evolving them before they pass it on to their own children. That's one. Second is when you mentioned about the fact that as you grow, as you hit 27, 30, you may start to realize that childhood, the way you were treated in childhood or your environment in childhood is affecting you now. So to that, I just want to say that is that life is not going to be perfect, which means no parenting is going to be perfect. But at the same time, it also, and I've heard this a lot of my good friends and family members who are parents, like no one prepares you. Even you can read every book, but ultimately parenting is a lot about listening to your own intuition as well. So that's why I said if the parents work on themselves, automatically they're going to be better parents. And children don't learn by listening, they learn by seeing. They copy what you do and not what you say. So if you are all the time, if parents are always busy, always on their laptops, always on their phones, the child is going to learn that that's the way to be, right? But if the parent is more present with the child in whatever that they're doing, the child is going to feel like they don't need to do extra to feel the love and the attention from their parents, right? Which means the child is already being programmed to know that they are enough. And they show up in the world feeling that they are enough, feeling that they are loved, feeling that they are appreciated for who they are, and they don't have to constantly chase better goals, better hobbies, more grades, prestigious schools to feel that unconditional love and acceptance from their own family. And this I can tell you, in some ways I feel truly blessed, because some things that my parents have done so right, it's not that they were perfect as well, but some things that they have done so right has made me as well as my sibling, my sister, have the freedom in our minds to speak our minds, to follow what our heart says, and ultimately we've turned out quite good,
Very good.
Exactly. I mean, whatever I've done today, my book, to my brands, to who I am as a person, how creatively I feel free in my head, the kind of courageous decisions I have taken, And trust me, it's taking a lot for me to even admit that, on a podcast. But it's taught me also to really like love and appreciate myself. And so that is one. Let's parents working on themselves, reparenting their inner child. Third thing is, like I said, no parenting is perfect. So what you can do is instill the right values in your children. You can't safeguard them from failure, but you can teach them how to have a relationship with failure, how to have a relationship with fear, and how to have discipline, how to have ethics, how to have humanity, how to treat people who are lesser than us in terms of their finances or maybe just the social status. How do we treat animals? How educating them on connecting with nature, because more and more, this I know from even my mom, who is in academics, in psychology, she's a clinical psychologist. The trend is that right now the kids are so busy, the parents are so busy, and also there is so much use of devices. And this research has shown that use of devices reduces brain development. So really young children going from like infant to toddlers to preschool, they are learning to develop their speech much later. So in a society where we are going into more isolation, we are going into more technology, I think these values of community, connection, conversation, right, are so important that is what is gonna keep us human at the end of the day and give us an edge over AI, right? Our intuition is our edge over AI, right? And when we work with our intuition and combine that with the power of AI, now you're a creative genius in so many ways. But if you are only going to depend on AI, then in fact, researchers, again, when I was listening to this podcast for A Resilient Mind, and they shared in that how use of AI is going to actually affect your brain if you don't know how to use it. Right. So there is so again, it comes back to empowering our children with the things, with the skill sets that are ultimately going to be valued in the coming years. And that starts with love, connection, all of that. And giving your children the right kind of nutrition, not having them, on dopamine very early on. Again, screens is again a source of dopamine. All of this is going to prevent problems in the later stages. So challenges, and it's going to bring them into more unique, authentic kids who are able to go out there and share their talent, share their gifts.
Right. That was super insightful. But since you brought up AI, now I'm
Oh my
curious
God.
about another question.
I'm not, but you can go ahead.
No, probably because one of the things that I'm seeing increasingly is
People are using ChatGPT for coaching and therapy.
Yes, exactly. So now, first of all,
Great question. I want to answer this.
What's your insight? What are your insights around that? People using ChatGPT or any generative AI for coaching.
Yeah.
Right. What are the setbacks or major drawbacks that, hey, you should not use generative AI for coaching because you know that your body, your mind is different, and they might not be able to understand a lot, right? So from that perspective, what are the pros as
and
well as cons?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So first is, let's talk about the pros. The pros is that you have sovereignty.
Yeah.
Right? Which is amazing in this day and age. We are moving towards more individuality, more sovereignty, which means internet has really decentralized a lot of the powers which earlier were, top down. So knowledge is going to be more available. You have more resources. And that means you have more, in a way, more potential for power. Let's put it that way, right? To fuel yourself in the right ways. Now, that's sovereignty. Second is, it's of course cost effective. Third is, you can have it's time agnostic, location agnostic, everything, culture agnostic in so many ways. And that can also act as a con as well, unless you're like really going to train the ChatGPT like that, right? So as of now, I think this is what comes to me in my mind as the pros. Now, cons is that, first of all, understanding that we are humans, and that means we are emotional beings. And healing, transformation cannot happen when we don't address the emotional components and only look at how do I make a strong mindset, how do I make a killer body, how do I do all of that. And that's why I'm coaching emotional resilience, because I know I have myself firsthand experienced the importance of emotional resilience for physical consistency. For me to show up at the gym 4 times a week or even challenge myself to a goal comes because emotionally I am there for myself. Right. I have my back, right? Even when life is not doing that. So coming back to this, we heal not just in isolation. When we understand ourselves, maybe we need solitude, we need that alone time. But like I said, like I was talking about Shala, when we truly come together and witness the power, there is some and in my breathwork teacher training as well, we've learned this. There is the healing power of being witnessed, as witnessed in your pain, witnessed in your joy, witnessed in your complete expression of your raw emotion. And imagine you are witnessed with also being told that you are completely accepted, whether you are in a raw, vulnerable state, or you could be in a really successful, like killing it mode. And that is what heals the human, is to be like, I am human.
Right.
And I'm loved for who I am, ultimately. Because once that happens, then the individual feels sovereign enough to go out there in the world, be themselves, be authentic, go after their creativity, monetize it, all of that, right? So that's the biggest drawback, is that AI is not going to witness you in who you are, in your raw state. Second is, AI probably doesn't feel, even though it will say all the nice flowery words, it will give you probably popular proverbs, it will quote poetry, it will do everything to make you feel seen and validated, but it will not play the devil's advocate. It will not probably give you the whole picture.
Right.
It will not probably give you truth, honesty, right? And I have personally, I have tried it, doing that with ChatGPT, where I've asked ChatGPT towards one decision and then played my own devil's advocate and said, oh, maybe not, maybe I think I'm doing this and maybe that's why I shouldn't. And it didn't necessarily agree with me, so I was quite happy about that. Right. But then I've heard many cases where ChatGPT or any AI is going to basically just validate everything you say. So if you say, maybe I should go for this way of handling it, it'll say yes, yes, yes. Then if you say that way, it'll say yes, 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 right? So how do you know what is the, how do you know if this, what experience is this ChatGPT coming from? Whereas when you work with a coach, when you work with a facilitator, with a therapist, any kind of support, which is a human as well, you can still understand where they are coming from, what's their life experience,
right?
What energy are they emitting, right? Here you're with a device. So that is and I think these two are the biggest components of people really feeling seen, feeling completely witnessed and accepted in their most, like I said, raw form, human form. That's what will empower people to go forward. That, hell yes, I am with my imperfections, but that doesn't stop me from going ahead. Because in that process of showing up again and again with the radical acceptance and doing what I have to do, which I said, like aligned action, I become a different person. That's integration again.
Okay. Yeah.
So ChatGPT may make you a plan to help you integrate all of that.
Yeah.
But who's gonna be there, check in on you?
Yeah.
That, hey, are you doing that? Hey, I'm proud of you. Hey, like, go meet this person because they are also in the same, like stage as you are.
I mean, I have a lot of issues with that. I mean, personally, I love ChatGPT. I have a personal subscription for it as well, because it.
So do I.
For some use cases, it can.
Honestly, it has many uses. So, in fact, like me, I'm not an expert on astrology. I'm not expert on intuitive astrology. I don't know how to read my birth chart and things like that. But as I have gone through my own journey, some things that I don't do for as charge people for, but for my own personal know-how to understand my life journey, I have uploaded my birth charts on ChatGPT, asked them various questions, and because I know what patterns I am working through, I have made the most complex prompts and given ChatGPT and be like, okay, now it's not that I'm going to listen to it, but it's giving me 5 other perspectives that I wouldn't have known from because I'm not an expert on astrology.
Yeah, but I feel it leads to a rabbit hole, especially
Yes.
if you're not trained with AI, right?
Absolutely.
You're not trained with the prompts. Like you mentioned that you give ChatGPT some really complex prompts, so that's why you get quality results as well. But
Exactly,
someone who's
yeah.
not trained,
Gold in, gold out.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that they're getting into a rabbit hole. ChatGPT is exceptionally good at validating you and making you feel like you're the king or the queen of the world. Right now, people can get addicted to that. They can have this feedback loop. They can get addicted to that, and which in turn leads to an increase in their reliance on ChatGPT for everything.
For everything, yeah.
Which might not be a use case suited to be delivered by an AI to you.
Exactly.
So I think we need, as a society, we need to maintain caution on that. Definitely. But when it comes to aspects about fitness and coaching, even psychological coaching and all that, I still treat on the, gates being I don't think it's a good idea as of now, because there are so many things like hallucination, generative AI models hallucinating and all those things. So definitely, like you mentioned, let it help you create a plan. But when it comes to extremely personalized things, and you're sometimes people even disbursing their emotions on ChatGPT, I do not think that's a good idea, because it's just validating you.
But
and you're not
again,
doing some solid work.
I just would say there is nothing like good and bad. That's again subjective. So whoever is doing it and they are having their own experiences with AI or by themselves, maybe they need to go through that. And that's what I mean by, even again as a coach or as a space holder, I cannot control the journey of even my client. I can merely present the truths, I can give them the tools, and I can be there with them, walk with them, but ultimately they are going to receive what they sow ultimately.
Right.
And again, it's not about holier than thou at all, because again, like I said, maybe that person is doing something good. Maybe they cannot afford a coach, maybe they cannot afford a therapist, and maybe even 10% they would improve on it. Right? So we can never, like I said, growth is never linear.
So you never know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I don't want to diss for our ChatGPT, but there was a recent event, but it's all good. I mean, it's just that I want to give a message, also through you, that we need to maintain caution, because there are a lot of things that we have not explored with Gen AI. And the regulation is definitely coming, when it comes to legal regulation, or, authorities being like, okay, this aspect of the model needs to be regulated, this needs to be shut down, right? So that is good. But then as a society, we should be more empowered about how to use it, and, also when to use it.
Maybe you can do a podcast on that. But the thing is,
exactly.
Again, I'm not going to subscribe to shoulds and goods and bads, because again, there is so much at play beyond our logical mind. So I wouldn't, me personally, wouldn't look at only this from a logical point of view.
Right.
And like I said, right, everyone is going to receive what they are meant to receive ultimately. So that's what I believe.
That could also be right. All right, so lots of interesting things to pack here, but I guess I would love to have you come back to the podcast and explore all the topics in great detail. I think as we were talking in the car as well, that this was more about covering the depth, or the breadth of the topics. And then, over time, if you agree to do another podcast whenever we meet, we can, cover topics to the depth. Definitely.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. But I want to, wrap up with with one last question. and that is on for someone who's listening and feels curious but maybe a little lost. What can they actually do to begin this journey, with all the practices that you teach? And if you were to create a starter toolkit, what would you put in it for basically someone who faces a crisis, or is feeling something is not right, something's off? How can they deal with that in a looking at both your initiative, Kinetic Living and Shala? What are some tools from a starter toolkit perspective that they can actually lean into to get started?
So it would, like, because I address body, emotions, the mind, as well as in some cases the spirit as well, right? The soul work. First is, if someone is feeling lost, first ensure that you are taking care of your body. And that means, when I say taking care, I mean it has to experience both uncomfortable times in the day where you are challenging the body for at least 20-30 minutes, and then you're also giving it the adequate rest it needs in the form of proper nourishment, proper diet, proper nutrition, proper sleep, proper hydration, and proper micronutrients. I think this is the most basic thing that most people are struggling even with this to maintain consistently, because ultimately your body is the basis on which your mind can feel grounded, your mind can feel calm. And this is where it differs from fitness, is because we don't just stop here, but let's say you work out 3 to 4 times a week and you're practicing good nutrition 4 times a week out of 7 days. On the other days, you need to do maximum 10 to 15 minutes of functional breathing exercises such as box breathing, or from yoga pranayama, you can use Nadi Shodhana or alternate nostril breathing. Do some grounding in nature. That will help you slow down a little bit, even though your pace of life is really fast. And I think these are some tools that will help you connect and regulate your nervous system. Shake for 5 minutes in a day. Again, that's related to releasing the edgy energy. So this is on the body and energy aspects. Now, the mind and emotions aspect, first thing is, let's say someone is feeling lost or they are going through something challenging. Do not judge what the situation is. And most people forget to see the learnings from a situation because they are blaming it on something outside of them, which makes you think, okay, this situation is happening to me, which means I'm not playing any role in this things going bad. It's just happening to me, means I am not done anything wrong. But the moment you say I've not done anything wrong, you have completely cut off the possibility that you could look inward and say, what are my unconscious beliefs and my unconscious thoughts and energy that I'm emitting that is attracting these kind of behaviors or challenging situations to me, right? When you pause there and when you look inward, this requires a lot of, I would say, discomfort, like tolerance to discomfort, because it's not comfortable to look and say, oh, maybe you could have done something, or maybe there is a past that is coming up to be resolved in that sense, right? And this is why we talk about the inner child and shadow.
Right.
So you see how everything is connected. And now when they take this time to go inward and they're going to feel uncomfortable, that's when the fitness, the food, the breath work, the nature is going to help them to navigate meaning face it first. So that's why I said the body and the movements are the basis, right? Now when you see, what do I have to learn? What is it showing me about myself? This is where people can maybe little bit use ChatGPT, I would say, to become aware about it. But once they're aware, they need to have some kind of guidance, some kind of maybe a guidance figure, a mentor or a coach or a therapist, someone who is non-judgmental, who is neutral, who can be a mirror for them. Right. And this is where I would say, like, the inculcate once a week reflection habit, that what worked, what can I do more of, or how can I keep doing what I did right, like how can I keep anchoring those patterns, and what are some of the patterns that are not working. right? How can I change my behavior or my schedule basis this reflection? That's integration.
Yeah.
You get that? And now once, let's say, once in a month, see if you can like go to a group or enroll yourself in something where you can do a deep dive at least once a month and look at it. Where are you going? Where did you start? Are you going where you intended to go? All of that, right? And have community, have friends who uplift you, have friends who are true to you, who will call your BS, but who will also show you
Keep you in check.
that you can do it,
Right.
right? That's very important to have a community or even a set of people who believe in you. Because when you don't believe in yourself, these are the people who are going to help you go forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is what I would say is that starter kit in that sense: physical quotient, awareness quotient, and happiness quotient. And once a year, come to Shala, place like Shala. Come meet other people who are on the path and who have been practicing same tools as you. So now you're talking similar language as well. And I genuinely believe that when you go on this path and you realize you don't know everything all the time, it's not about the mind. Then you start operating from something deeper, which is more compassion, which is more respect for the other human being, and then you won't even bother if this person is totally different than you are, but you will connect authentically.
Right.
You will connect because I'm curious about you rather than, hey, you think like me and therefore I want to talk to you.
Echo chambers wala mentality.
Exactly. And that's what even social media is doing, right? It's only giving you things that you like, which means it's creating a bubble, and that's isolating you. People are isolated in their homes because first they are closed in the heart. And the only way we can open the heart is when we take time to connect with our body and our breath
Right.
on a regular basis. Yeah.
So many wonderful things. I mean, this is the last question, I promise. But
Yeah,
looking,
so I hope it's the last. I'm tired
Yes.
now.
But looking back at where you started and how your work has evolved, what's the vision that guides you today? Like, what's next for Coach Urmi and her enterprise? You don't want to disclose that yet.
No, I mean, my vision has always been that is to empower individuals and companies in the world to become best friends with their body in a way that they are able to go after what they want, what makes them happy, and maximize their human potential. So
Right.
when I say maximize, I'm not saying do more, but what I mean is express their potential, express their creativity. Because like I said, kinetic living is going to help them come into coherence. And then having a community like Shala is going to make sure that when you come back home, you're fueled from all that love from the gathering.
Right.
And I think ultimately we all need to, that's my second mission is that, like I said, sovereign being, to have that ability to have the balance of deep work, deep rest, balance our masculine, feminine. We haven't spoken about that at all, but like to be able to completely do from a place of stillness, and that's the being aspect. And I think once we have that inner outer balance, wow, that's my mission. And I'm doing it through online programs. I'm doing it through, the reason again online is because anyway people are out there spending so much time in commuting, and yes, people are looking for community, but ultimately it's not needed every day. So every day do tools that are more time efficient, more productivity efficient, more creative, at the same time less time consuming. But once in a while come into community, recharge, be in that silo, because we again grow through co-regulation. I could be like working on my patterns, you could be working on your patterns, but it's only when we come together, when things like have friction, right, or flow. That's where we learn how much have we really integrated.
No, thank you for such powerful insights. definitely there's a lot to unpack, but I think we'll leave it at this for now.
Sure, yes.
Just to give a glimpse to people about how your programs are structured, and what are the problems or the core components or aspects that they address or they help address. So thank you so much for making the time to be here and share your knowledge and wisdom with us. There's clearly a lot. There's so much.
So I do one-on-ones, I do groups, I do
Yeah.
retreats, and we also have our self-paced courses. So if anyone wants to just go and learn and apply on their own pace, that's also possible. And again, the whole point is to give them tools to become independent.
Yeah, and look, you do so much. So to someone like me, you're looking outside in from a layman's perspective, your schedule is berserk, but still you have this amazing power to make time for others. For example, having such a tight schedule, you made some time to come share your wisdom on this podcast. So that's something really, I think that only comes with energy, work, and working on your fundamentals right. So that's a force to reckon with. You're a force to reckon with.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for coming, and I'd really like to have you back to discuss certain things that we might not have talked about today. Thank you so much, Coach Urmi.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.